Hi everyone, I'm Bob Fox from NCAS and I'm here today to answer some of your questions on the new allergen legislation. It came into force on December the 13th, 2014. It applies right across Europe and it makes it obligatory for all food businesses to give customers information about the contents of the food that they're selling. From December the 13th, 2014, you as caterers will be required to provide a warning to your customers if any of the food that you serve contains one or more of the 14 allergens that are covered by the legislation. So in other words, caterers or you must know exactly what's in their food and they must understand the requirements they need to fulfill the required legal obligations. So to do that, caterers must be able to provide evidence of the exact ingredients used in their food or menu. So how do you do that? Well, it depends on how you sell your food. If you're selling packaged goods, the new rules state that all the ingredients or the allergenic ingredients in your pre-packed food must be emphasized in the ingredients list. And you can do this by either highlighting or emboldening or capitalizing or underlining or italicizing or even putting them in another font. If on the other hand you're doing loose food, and loose food includes things like plated meals or a butty from a sandwich bar or a burger from a mobile. It also includes foods that are packed on the same catering premises from which you might be selling loose food. For example, if you're a sandwich bar that normally sells sandwiches made to order, but also provides some sandwiches that you box up and sell to a local garage, then that's classed as loose food. So the same rules apply. If you sell food at a distance, however, for instance from a takeaway, then you can do it in several ways. You can do it at the point of menu, i.e. it can be written on your menu that that particular item contains food, or it can be done at the point of delivery, and you could do this in a written format that was handed to the customer when the food was delivered to their premises. So will enforcement officers be lenient if caterers fail to comply with the new rules straight away? Well, unfortunately not. The legislation was adopted by the European Union in September 2011. So the argument is you've already had 3 years to get things ready and in place. So in other words, you're expected to be fully compliant with the legislation on or before the 13th of December 2014. And unfortunately, ignorance is no excuse. So what are the 14 major allergens? Well, there's no point in me trying to reel them off right now, but you'll see from the list what we're going to put on the screen, the 14 allergens are listed there. They're the main ones, and what you need to do is to be absolutely certain that if any one of those or a byproduct of any one of those is included in your menu in anywhere, then you must be aware of them and to be able to conform to legislation. Isn't it obvious when a dish contains one or more of the allergens? Well, yes, it can be. Take a bacon and egg sandwich. It obviously has an egg, and an egg is an allergen. But many of the allergens are hidden away where you might least expect to find them. You might be surprised to know that Worcester sauce, for instance, contains anchovies. Anchovies are an allergen. Wine, for instance, can contain egg white and also sulfites, which are used in the fining and clearing process. Curry sauces contain ghee, which is a type of clarified butter. So as well as identifying allergens in the main dish, you also have to be very aware of the condiments and sauces that you might be using in your recipes. So what's the worst thing that allergens can do? Well, it might surprise you to know that just a trace of an allergen on a knife or a chopping board can cause an allergenic reaction. Even a tiny amount can cause anaphylactic shock, which can and does kill in extreme cases. One of the things you also have to be aware of is what to do and how to recognize an allergenic reaction. How would you know, for instance, if one of your customers had one? Well, there are symptoms that you could look for, such as swelling in the face, throat or mouth, difficulty in breathing, a sudden drop in blood pressure, a skin rash, nausea and anxiety. Those are typically the kind of reactions that you might see. It's all very well being able to recognize one, but what would you do if a customer had an allergenic reaction? Well, all your staff should know how to proceed if a customer does have one of these unfortunate instances. First of all, do not move them. Moving them can actually make them worse. And secondly, call 999 immediately and describe the situation. Explain that you think the customer might have had an allergenic reaction and might have gone into anaphylaxis. If that's the case, that triggers a very special thing with emergency services and they get priority. You could also ask if the customer had an adrenaline pen. Somebody who's aware that they have an allergenic problem will probably carry such a thing. If they can do it themselves, that's great. If not, and you're a trained first aider, you could administer it for them. Of course, if you're not a first aid trainer, or if you're not first aid trained, should I say, then you need to wait for the ambulance to come for somebody to do that professionally. Could a customer take legal action against me if I give somebody an allergenic reaction? Well, one case has actually happened already. A TV chef, I'm not going to mention his name on camera, was already fined £8,000 for one of his restaurants in serving a dish which, when the customer had asked for it to be gluten-free, it turned out it wasn't. The business was also had to pay £9,000 something odd pounds in costs, so it can be an exercise. And so therefore it's much better to be rather safe than sorry, because it's highly likely that a number of cases will be brought to task and will come to court. If for no other reason, it will be to raise the profile of the case of allergens. How do you train your staff? Well, it's not that hard. A little bit of work for most businesses at the beginning to assess all the items that you serve, not forgetting the condiments, remember, like sauces and other ingredients. Record them in a book or on a sheet, which could be in your food safety management system. And then once you've got those down, you put a chart on the wall, your chart lists all your products on your menu, and then you can tick across the top line all of the allergens that are potentially involved, put the chart on the wall, and then your staff can see it in instant for any one product if there's an allergen involved, and keep your customer informed. It'd be a good idea also to have a sticker or some means of identifying on the front of your unit or in a place where the customer can see very clearly, so that they know if they do have an allergenic problem, all they've got to do is speak to a member of staff and they'll be able to fully inform them as to whether there's an allergen in one of the products that they're asking for. You can also keep the customer informed by adding allergen information onto the menu. You could put it on a chalkboard. You could put it on a wall-mounted menu. The important thing is you and all members of your staff should know, in fact, has to know, whether there are allergens involved in the products that you're selling. Otherwise, you're breaking the law. What if you don't know whether or not your food contains allergens? Unfortunately, that cannot actually ever happen. Under the new rules, you must be able to tell a customer whether there are allergens in your food. You must know. It's a legal requirement. If you don't do it, then you could be liable to legal action. You might ask, will the new legislation actually be enforced, or is it just another piece of red tape which seems to be piling on us from the European Union? Well, trading standards officers and environmental health officers, they're the ones that will be liable for enforcing this new regulation, and it is a criminal offence not to be compliant. The fine is up to £5,000, but what you really have to bear in mind is a fine up to £5,000 from your local enforcement team is probably the least of your problems. That might well lead to a civil action. It's certainly going to lead to bad publicity and probably your name and business being mentioned in the local newspaper. So the knock-on effects are huge. It's really not worth taking the chance. So if you're thinking about what chance you've got of getting away with it, the answer is there is none. It's only a matter of time. Once you've registered with Environmental Health, which is a legal requirement anyway, your business is automatically then on a rota depending on how they've risk assessed you, and you will get a standardised inspection, and you can be absolutely certain that when they come to inspect your premises, they will be wanting to know what you have done about allergens, and you will be expected to demonstrate the system you used and the information that you've gleaned on your menu. They will look at it very closely, especially in the early stages. So how many allergen sufferers are there in the UK? Well, there are probably more than you think. Allergy UK, which is one of the information sources, state that there are significant increases in people suffering with food allergens in the UK, in particularly children, interestingly enough, and at least 21 million adults in the UK suffer from at least one allergy. So out of all this, are there any positive points for you, the caterer? Well, yes, there are. If you think about it, the legislation could help you tap into one of several new markets worth an estimated £100 million per annum in the UK alone. Offering a gluten-free menu, for instance, could give you that niche market, which helps you get jobs easier. As event organisers are going to have to be aware of allergens and aware of their caterers and their ability to be able to deal with these things, and they will have to take those incidents into account when booking caterers for the event. So the further you are up the adoption ladder as far as this piece of legislation goes, and the more aware of you are, and the more you can publicise that fact, it might well mean that you get first big on jobs. So what's next for allergen information? Well, we can never be certain. The one thing that's for sure is this legislation is under constant annual review at the European Union, so we can expect more allergens being added to the list at some point in the future. So you do need to keep an eye on things. You do need, if you're not an NCAS member, to keep yourself aware of what the changes are in the law. If you've got any more questions, it's not a problem. We've produced a free allergen toolkit which is available for download from our website www.ncas.org.uk. At the moment it's on the front page. It'll probably soon slip behind that, but it's there for you if you need it. You can always ring up 0121 603 2524. If you're an NCAS member, we will be sending you out a new section which will be slotted into your due diligence system with all the information and the necessary paperwork for you to fill in to make sure you're fully compliant. And we'll also be sending you a sticker that you can put somewhere that's obvious to your customers that basically states if they have any questions about allergens, then to ask a member of staff. So please don't forget, it is very important that you're up and ready by the 13th of December. There isn't any leniency in terms of time. It is something you need to do. Hope this information has been useful to you. Thank you for listening.